Okay, today we are going to start talking about the endocrine system and hormones specifically, and where they come from and what they do. Okay, so your endocrine system provides a slow and long-lasting coordination of body functions. It consists of glands and tissues that secrete hormones. And hormones are transported by the blood to your tissues and your organs. I'm sure you've all heard the word hormones, so now we're going to find out exactly what they do. So this is a picture of all the glands and tissues that deal with the endocrine system. Okay, so there's quite a few. We have the hypothalamus, the pituitary, the pineal gland, the thyroid, the thymus, the parathyroids, the adrenals, pancreas, ovaries, and testes. Okay, so as you can see, these organs and tissues are throughout your whole body, right? There are several of them. They each play a different role, and they each deal with different hormones. Okay? So, basically what happens is you have target cells within your body. And these cells, these target cells, contain specific receptors. And those receptors can only take in the hormone that they're set up to take in. So things are very specific throughout your body. Hormone receptors can be located on the plasma membrane or inside the cell. Non-target cells, or basically cells that do not have receptors, are not affected by hormones. So that makes sense, right? Like basically the hormones can only talk to cells that can understand them, and that is through a receptor. And as I mentioned, those receptors can either be on the plasma membrane or within the cell. And that depends on the type of hormone. So, hormones basically then, once they get into those receptors, they talk to the cell and they can alter metabolic activities. They can speed things up, they can slow things down, they can start reactions, or make more hormones, different hormones be secreted. I mean, there's an array of things that can happen once those hormones are able to basically get accepted by those target cells. And there are two types of hormones that produce different effects on target cells. There are steroid hormones and non-steroid hormones. Okay? Steroids, remember, are a type of lipid. So we have basically lipid hormones and non-lipid hormones. And the non-lipids are usually proteins, okay? Or peptides, which proteins, based out of amino acids for the most part. So here are our steroid hormones. Like I mentioned, they are lipid soluble. They are lipid based. And that means that they can pass through the plasma membrane. Remember, the plasma membrane is a phospholipid bilayer. So these guys can just get through the plasma membrane. And once they do, they can bind to receptors in the nucleus, inside the cell. And they can act on the DNA in the nucleus. And they can cause production of messenger RNA that then will exit the nucleus, or they can lead to the production of specific proteins, usually enzymes, right? Enzymes are proteins. Non-steroid hormones are, like I mentioned, usually proteins or peptides. They are not fat soluble. They are not lipid based. And they act a little differently. They have to rely on two different messengers to produce an effect. A first messenger, which is the hormone, which will bind to the plasma membrane, And then this binding will trigger the release of a membrane enzymes that lead to a CAMP, which is your second messenger formation. CAMP is cyclic adenosine monophosphate. It is hydrophilic and it is a second messenger molecule. And it will activate other enzymes that will then play a role in changing the cell function. So these guys do not just zip right into the cell, they work a little differently. They first bind to the plasma membrane and then they set off a reaction. And the second messenger comes in and plays another role. Then we have the prostaglandins. And these are a set of lipids, and they are usually produced at sites of damage or infection. And they play a huge role in controlling inflammation or blood flow. They deal with formations of blood clots and the induction of labor. They are produced by cells in almost every organ of your body. And they can increase or decrease the second messenger, the CAMP level. Therefore, they can modify the effects of non-steroid hormones. As I mentioned, they can promote inflammation with pain and fever. They can deal with constricting or dilating blood vessels. They promote blood clotting. And they can promote excretion of water, of electrolytes, by your kidneys. Okay, so they play many different roles throughout your entire body. Hormones need to be controlled, okay? You want your hormones to be in working well. You want the exact amount that you need to function. If you have hyposecretion, that means not enough. If you have hyposecretion, that means not enough. If you have hypersecretion, that means too much. Neither of those are good because you want your body to be homeostatic, right? So you want the exact amount to be being secreted. You don't want too much or too little of any hormone because that will probably cause a problem. The glands that produce hormones are activated through different stimuli. There are different ways that these glands will produce and excrete hormones. It might be because they've been acted on by another hormone. It might be that a hormone has produced some type of chemical, or it could be a neural impulse. So again, it's specific to the hormone and to the gland. And these stimuli can either stimulate or inhibit secretion. So we can either have more being released or less. And that brings us to the feedback loops. So hormone secretion is regulated by negative feedback. This means that a hormone is secreted when the concentration of a substance is too low. Your body senses that there's not enough and says, uh-oh, we need to get some more into the bloodstream. We need to get some more to that target organ. So when the concentration is too low, your system kicks in. This is a negative feedback loop. The hormone then causes the body cells to bring the substance back to the right level. Once normal levels are reached, the hormone secretion and concentration will decrease. So it's kind of like a thermostat. If it's too cold, your heat kicks in. Once it reaches the right temperature, it turns off. That is a negative feedback loop. You have something called a pituitary gland. And this is attached to the hypothalamus by a short stalk in your brain. And this is one of the main endocrine glands. It is in your brain, as I said, and it is protected by bone, and it consists of two different parts, the anterior lobe and the posterior lobe. And depending on what lobe you're in, we are going to talk about the hormones associated with that distinct lobe. Okay? So the pituitary gland. This is a very important gland in your endocrine system. So there is a releasing hormone for each hormone made by the anterior lobe. Some releasing hormones promote and others inhibit. Production of releasing hormones is regulated by negative feedback. Then we have what's called the posterior lobe. And this is controlled by neural impulses that travel down secretory neuron axons from the hypothalamus to the posterior lobe. Axons then release hormones to the posterior lobe and then into the bloodstream. So, let's talk a little bit about the hormones that are produced in the anterior lobe. There are several. There is a chart in your book. All right. So we have growth hormone. This stimulates the division and growth of body cells. It promotes the synthesis of proteins and other biological molecules. It increases the available energy for producing these molecules, and it is most abundant during our growth years, or basically children through adolescence. The secretion of growth hormone is regulated by two hypothalamic releasing hormones. GH releasing hormone, which stimulates growth hormone secretion, and GH inhibiting hormone, which inhibits growth hormone secretion. So if the GH releasing hormone, that is triggered by strenuous exercise or hypoglycemia or an excess of amino acids. And that would cause then more GH to be released. On the flip of that, the inhibiting hormone will be released if when it's triggered by hyperglycemia. So again, your body's talking to each other. All your organs are talking to one another, and they're using these hormones as little messengers. So if there's too much of something or not enough of something, your body says, we need to do this. And this is an example of that. There is also something called TSH. This is thyroid stimulating hormone. You've probably heard the word thyroid, right? A lot of people have thyroid problems. And that has to do with your thyroid then not producing or overproducing the hormones. And you might have to take medication for it. So thyroid stimulating hormone stimulates the thyroid gland to produce thyroid hormone. This secretion is regulated by TRH, tryptophan releasing hormone, and this happens from the hypothalamus. So low blood thyroid hormone levels cause TRH to be released. So if you don't have enough thyroid hormone in your blood, your body kicks in and releases TRH. And this causes the production of TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. High thyroid hormone levels will inhibit TRH, meaning you won't produce anymore because you've already got enough. And that would then decrease the TSH release. Then we have adrenocorticotropic hormone, ACTH. This controls secretion of hormones by the cortical portion of the adrenal cortex. Your adrenal glands sit on your kidneys. The secretion is controlled by corticotropin releasing hormone, which is called CRH for short. And that works, as we've mentioned, on a negative feedback loop. Excess stress can cause excess ACTH production. If you've ever heard that, one of the stress hormones is cortisol. This is what we're talking about. Gonadotropins are, there are two types of these. One is FSH, which is follicle stimulating hormone, and one is LH, luteinizing hormone. This secretion is caused by gonadotropin releasing hormone from the hypothalamus. These two hormones have to do with a woman's menstrual cycle. If you menstruate, the reason you menstruate is because monthly is because of these levels fluctuate throughout the month. Okay, so here it is. FSH in females promotes development of ovarian follicles. In males, it promotes sperm production. LH functions in females to stimulate ovulation and progesterone production, and in males stimulates testosterone production. So males and females both have these. They have them in different amounts, and they do different things because the male and female body is different. Then we have a hormone called prolactin, and this initiates and maintains milk production by the mammary glands after childbirth. So it is prolactin that causes milk to be produced so that the baby can nurse. Secretion is regulated by prolactin releasing hormone and prolactin inhibiting hormone from the hypothalamus. So again, depending how much you need in your bloodstream and in your body, you would either have the releasing hormone or the inhibiting hormone working, being released from the hypothalamus. That brings us to the posterior lobe hormones, and there are only two of these. The majority are in that anterior lobe. Hormones are produced by neurons in the hypothalamus. We know that. There are two types that are released from the posterior lobe: the antidiuretic hormone, ADH, and oxytocin. Antidiuretic hormone, ADH, regulates the presence of aquaporins in the distal tubule and collecting ducts of the nephron. The nephron deals with the kidneys. It promotes the water reabsorption by the kidneys to reduce water volume in the urine. It helps regulate your blood volume and blood pressure. Secretion is regulated by neurons that monitor water concentration within your blood. So a decrease in the water concentration of blood causes ADH secretion to increase. An increase in water concentration of blood causes ADH secretion to decrease. So again, this is helping you maintain your homeostatic level. You want your blood volume and blood pressure to be correct. And if it fluctuates in any way, this hormone comes on in and tries to get it back to where it needs to be. Then we have oxytocin. This stimulates and strengthens the contraction of smooth muscles of the uterus during labor. This is one of the few hormones that is regulated by positive feedback, meaning each contraction produces more oxytocin to get a stronger contraction, more oxytocin, stronger contraction to get that baby out. So when you're in labor, when a woman is in labor, the oxytocin increases to make those labor contractions come harder and closer together to finally be able to push that baby out. It also causes the milk injection due to infant suckling. So oxytocin deals with pregnancy and birth, labor, milk. Okay, so we have covered basically what a hormone is, and we've talked about the hypothalamus and the anterior and posterior lobe and the hormones located in each lobe. You need to know the hormone, you need to know what it does, and you need to know where it comes from, meaning the anterior or posterior lobe. Okay, and you should know its function. Great. Let me know if you have any questions.